This is the fifth session in the training series, Secrets of a Successful Organizer. Um, I just wanted to recap real quick since we've been meeting once a month and it might be hard to remember some of the earlier topics we covered. Or if you haven't been to one of these before, we were just talking about sending around the materials from the previous training so that people can review them. So we've covered the topics of beating apathy, the importance of organizing conversations to beating apathy. We had a session on mapping your workplace, both the physical, where your coworkers are physically located, and the social groups they form. And then the last session that we did in October was on identifying leaders in the workplace and building a team. So the whole point of that is that, everything is pretty interrelated. And through all of that, we were talking about organizing issues and having conversations to understand what your coworkers care about, and how to bring them, get them more and more involved with organizing. So today we're actually going to delve into the topic of what makes a good organizing issue, and how do we build a campaign that wins on that issue. So some of you might remember we covered the bullseye, thinking of your coworkers as arranged on a dartboard. And the goal of organizing is to bring your coworkers to inner layers, to inner rings of the dartboard, aiming for the bullseye, and doing this through organizing conversations and winning on issues that they care about, which we'll talk about today. This is a way of looking at all those dots representing workers. I'm looking at the next task involved. The organizers one-on-one conversations. Organizers identify leaders and recruits those leaders to an organizing committee to knit everyone together. So ultimately, we want to go from a workplace where there's organization structure by the boss to an organized workplace where workers have built their own structure, and we know how we can reach every one of our coworkers through our organized structure. So today we are going to talk about winning on issues. So, and turning issues into a campaign. But first, I want to throw out the question, what is a campaign?
An organized mass set of actions that lead to the completion of a specific goal.
Cool, I like that. Organized set of mass, sorry, I might be mixing with mass actions that lead to the successful completion of the goal. Okay, yeah. So I think what Erin is saying is that it's not just one action, right? It's actually a series of actions aimed at achieving a particular goal. So why would we want a series of actions? Why not just a one-off action?
To build off and to escalate.
I was just saying, a lot of us tried to get people to go on strike, vote to strike on our last contract. We got like 25%. So not successful, but yeah, we built some momentum, but it failed.
Thanks, Josh. Can I just ask a follow-up question? Like,
yep.
was that all? It was just like, okay, they woke up like, okay, we're gonna try to get people to go on strike. There wasn't any build up to it.
There was. It wasn't like hyper coordinated. I feel like we kind of realized how many of us were at like meeting leading up to the contract. So I feel like we were kind of talking to each other there about like how we could get people to turn out strike. But then it was kind of like individualized. After that, in the stores, like I tried to coordinate rides and just make sure people had like plans to vote, or like try to figure out when people were leaving that day to coordinate people with each other, and just try to like figure out and just talk to people about like, you know, what people's concerns are about going on strike, because a lot of people want to but are nervous. So
Yeah, I think so. I want to go back to what Aaron said about like, you know, the importance of escalation in a campaign. Because if you start with like a smaller action, like frankly, a strike is like one of the hardest things, if not the hardest thing you can pull off. So starting with something smaller and giving yourself room to escalate and build up to getting more people involved, more people comfortable with taking more radical action. That's a really important aspect of why we want to plan a campaign, like a series of actions that, you know, that escalate. Um, so I think Mason, do you still want to speak to that question?
I can. I mean, I was just gonna say about campaign that I tried to take in like summer of 2020 when the pandemic was starting to really kick off. I was working at Jimmy John's and I collected signatures for a petition amongst my coworkers, and then delivered the petition. And due to a number of factors, just didn't do anything else, and it, of course, had no effect, and we didn't win any of our demands.
Yeah. Well, first, just want to, I don't mean to like dismiss in the, you know, individual actions. It's great that you did that, but I think that, yeah, that does illustrate like the importance of having like a plan, right? Like when you're building a campaign, always important to ask yourself, okay, what next? What if that doesn't work? Because you have to always anticipate, you know. So we'll talk about this when we talk about campaign mountain, like estimating like what the height of your power is going to be. Sometimes the height of your power is a petition, and unfortunately we know that doesn't always move the boss. But sometimes, you know, you can organize for something that will be more impactful as well. um, so yeah, so thank you both for sharing those examples. um, so now I want to invite Eric to give a brief summary of what you've been working on, and we'll come back to Eric throughout today's training to kind of weave in some of the lessons from what you're doing.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for the chance to speak. And thanks for the people that have already shared their stories. It's awesome to get to hear other people talk about what they're going through in their workplace and things like campaigns. I think for all of us that are here, you know, learning is a great opportunity to kind of formalize like what it is that we've been thinking about and doing in our workplace. For me in particular, I'm in the UFCW. I'm in Local 8 in California. I've been coming up against the issue of people not really being active and engaged membership, a lack of solidarity, a lack of awareness of things like an upcoming contract that we've got expiring in April. So a campaign that I put together and started with a group of people that, you know, feel the same way as I do in the workplace was a contract survey campaign. And we built a survey that asked a lot of open-ended questions about people, about what people wanted to see in their future contract. And the purpose behind that was to get people thinking about what that even looks like, because a lot of our membership, their experience when contracts come up has been being told within a very short period of time that, you know, here's your contract. It's the best you've ever seen. It's the best you're ever going to get. Vote yes. And not really having any idea of the input that went into that or how that contract came to be. And so we wanted to start that conversation and start that mindset growing. So we built a survey. You can see it up on the screen right now. The questions are very open-ended, so people have the opportunity to answer the questions with the way that they feel, however they feel. And part of this survey growing, it's been building up over time. We've gotten over 100 responses so far, so people are really interested. Our contract's up in April, so we've got 4 or 5 months, you know, a lead time ahead of our contract. So people are thinking about it now, and it's awesome to get to see what people are thinking about in terms of what they want for their future and improvement in their lives. And how we've been sharing that with each other is by using Discord. It's an app that you can build a meeting room in, basically. It's like a virtual server that everybody can join. And in my union, we don't have a union hall. We don't have a place that we can meet up and congregate and discuss this. So I chose to create a virtual room that we could all meet up and talk about. And this survey has allowed us to have something to get together and talk about because we share this information. And because it's open-ended, it's really encouraging and it builds a lot of solidarity and strength when we see that we're answering the same way. We want the same things. You didn't pick a bullet point on here unless you're talking about wages, which 30% in the house, baby, let's get it 30%. What's that? 50% of people say they want a 30% raise. I guarantee you that that is not something that the UFC or Albertsons was going to offer us, but they need to know it's what we want. So that's kind of the basis for our campaign. It's to build education and awareness around the power that we have as a union to define our contract. And the survey is the first step in that. And the Discord server is kind of the second step in allowing us to coalesce around that idea.
I just wanted to clarify, because I had this question at the beginning. This is not something that the local leadership is doing, right? You did this of your own initiative with other members.
Permission to speak freely regarding local leadership. If they're in the room, I do not apologize. You've brought this upon yourself. My local leadership actually discouraged this activity. I had my shop steward status stripped from me because of this. I was told that the expectation was more loyalty. I told them that I'm not kissing anybody's ring and carried on with my activity. My union rep went behind me and threw these surveys away. What I did was I made a flyer that had a QR code on it for you to scan with your phone and take the survey, and another QR code that invited you to join the Discord. He went around behind me in the stores that I had been in. I have 4 local stores in my area that I can kind of hit within a regular circle. He was going in behind me and throwing those away. Luckily, because we have very good relationships with each other as workers, I was getting phone calls from people that work in those stores letting me know that he had done that. I responded by putting him back on the table, and he responded by threatening me with posting unofficial union documents. And I told him I'm an official union member. If he touches it again, I'm reporting him to the NLRB. And he said, okay. And he stopped touching our paper. And it was actually one of, funny little side anecdote. After he threw away my first survey, and a checker called me from that store and said, he threw away your papers. And I said, I'd be right there to put them back on the table. And I showed up. We got like 16 responses. Like, it was the most energizing activity. Like, it actually blew up in his face in this really exciting way because people were pissed off that he was interfering with our attempt to have a discussion about what we want in our future. That's I'm sorry, I get a little worked up when I'm talking about that, but it doesn't make any sense why our union would be interfering in that way. Anyways, that's my tangent on that.
And Eric, do you want to share at this point how many people have filled out the survey and how many people have joined your unofficial Union Hall Discord channel?
Sure. So we've been running both for approximately a month. And in that time, we've gotten 108 responses to the survey, which is awesome. And currently in the Discord server, we have 65 people. And both of those, like I said, are on QR codes. So they're open invitations. If I've even invited my union rep to join us. I wish that he would come in on our side. So if anybody's interested in hanging out with Local 8 and offering their solidarity and support, I'm more than happy to invite you in as well. Just please don't interrupt the survey because I have plans with that. So while your opinion is valid, don't gunk it up with your spam. If you're not from Local 8, if you are and you're in the chat, please, let me know. We have contracts coming up and I'd be happy to share the link.
Well, that's awesome, Eric. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. So we'll come back to that. So now I want to talk about, well, actually, one thing I wanted to say is just because we get this question a lot from union members who aren't used to taking initiative outside of, without the express approval of union leadership. You do have a lot of democratic rights as a union member under not just the NLRB, but the LMRDA. That's the federal labor law that guarantees democratic rights to union members in the private sector, at least. So you have the right to distribute information and distribute surveys. and assemble and congregate on Discord or, in meeting rooms. So just wanted to emphasize that. Okay, so next we're going to look at just selecting an organizing issue. So just want to hear from maybe one person real quick. What are some of the elements of a good organizing issue? Like, how do you know when you have an issue that's a good one to really pursue, that that people are gonna activate around?
It has to be something that resonates, if not with everyone, but most of your rank and file. Because if it's something that's only for example, in grocery, for the meat cutters, well, the clerks aren't going to get behind you. If it's something for, grocery, then the front of the house may not get behind you. You need an issue that appeals to almost everyone, or as many as your rank and file as you can get.
Okay, so Emily got at some of the really important, really key element, which I think is pretty intuitive. It has to be widely felt. So like if you're trying to organize your whole store, you don't want to pick an issue that, a big chunk of the store just isn't going to care about very much. Should also be deeply felt. Everyone maybe they all care a little bit about something you've identified, but they don't care enough. If it's not deeply felt, it's going to be really hard to get them to take any kind of risky action. A couple more things to think about. It should be winnable. Obviously, we don't win every campaign we set out to win, but if it doesn't seem at least feasible, it's also going to be hard to get people on board, right? And you want to win. You want to pick something that you want to have wins under your belt. And then another important aspect, which I think a lot of people starting out in organizing may not be thinking about, is, does this build your capacity for future fights? Or if you're at the beginning of your campaign, does it build your capacity to escalate your campaign? Is it building your organizing? Is it bringing more potential leaders into your organizing? Is it going to build solidarity within your store, or within your workplace? So when we look at Campaign Mountain, we'll be thinking about how each fight builds off the last. And maybe you don't win the first round, but you come back stronger next time because you were able to bring in so many people through your initial organizing. So now I want to go back to Emily, since I know you've been doing a lot of organizing in Stop and Shop. What's an example of a good organizing issue you've identified?
What we are working on now, in our contract, management and administration is given the right to transfer at will an employee from one shop to another. And this creates kind of an atmosphere of fear amongst the rank and file, never knowing if you're a full-time staff, if you are going to be moved from your home store to another store with supposedly a week's notice. It can also be used, we're finding, as a punitive measure, or in a manner of retribution with really no definition as to why it's being done. So it's something that is deeply felt. It's something that most of the rank and file live kind of in fear of. And it's something that everybody can get behind because it affects every full-time person in every department, in every shop.
Amazing. And can I ask, does it feel winnable, or do the workers involved feel like it can be won?
Well, we're running up against our, some resistance, but it's that, I think Eric may have mentioned, it's this kind of, people who just are disaffected and don't, it's that, that feeling of, well, we've never had any success with this union, UFCW as well. They do nothing for us. Why bother? That kind of an attitude. So that's our biggest hurdle right now, is getting over that what's the use mentality and driving home the fact that, this is a win that we can get. And if we have one under our belt, just one, that will be a good jumping off point for a continued campaign and a broader campaign.
Yeah, that's great. You're doing the work of beating so-called apathy. We know it's not apathy. We know it's just been beaten down so long by the employer and by the union, unfortunately. Okay, great. So we'll be doing more thinking about issues shortly. So now we're also going to think about tactics, since those are kind of your key building block for your campaign. So to do that, we look at this concept called the action thermometer. And the idea is when you're thinking about tactics, there are some that are pretty low key, right? Pretty low stakes, but they might be a good place to start from. And then there are other tactics that are higher stakes. They take more organizing, more people to pull off. And then there are the highest stake tactics, like a walkout or going on strike, that take a lot of buildup. And that's they may take more effort and a lot more organizing power to build up to. So it's important when you're thinking of the appropriate tactics for your campaign and the appropriate tactic in time for your campaign. We really critically assessing, do we have the power and the strength for this tactic right now? Is one tactic something that should we try that before another tactic or after? And what's the appropriate tactic? What do we think is the height of our power? The tactic that will, like all of our work is building up to. But I find like a really key question that most people are grappling with is like where to start. What is like the right tactic to start with? And it really might be, I mean, in many cases, it is something like a survey that's pushing people to just start thinking about the issues and start building a group, which is exactly what Eric has done. And it might not feel like you're marching on the boss just yet, but it's the beginning stage of, for many, it can be the beginning stage of a successful campaign. So just to give you an idea, jog people's thinking about what some tactics are. So here are some tactics arranged on the action thermometer. Look it over. Maybe you agree or disagree about which tactics are higher intensity than others. So at the bottom, we have just a meeting, a small group meeting. And then this group is working their way up to conducting a survey. In this case, it's about health. This looks like it might have been teachers, like teachers organizing a teachers union. Later on, they escalated by publishing a newsletter, reaching out to parents. Then they called a bigger meeting of supporters. They did some kind of media outreach, and then they did a big walkout out of the meeting. So maybe that's where things stopped. Maybe, hopefully, they won what they were organizing for. That was the height of their power. So I'm gonna stop and share for a second. And can someone give me an example of a tactic, if you haven't talked about it yet, of a tactic that you've used in your workplace organizing?
Yeah, so with our daily department, so I've been working at Albertsons for about 6 years, and ever since I've been there, that the oven to the fryers has been broken. So hard for people to breathe. It's always hazy in the air. But finally, we just got tired of it, and so I talked to my rep. He's kind of the one that started this whole thing, really. But he had me actually take statements from. So I took statements from like 4 or 5 people from both deli and bakery because we're right next to them, and I transcribed them, sent them to my rep, and And I think that went to corporate, and corporate was it, and I think because it got sent to corporate, and that kind of resulted in the events being fixed like the very next day. So
So just to recap, that was you taking statements from workers who were affected by the issue and bringing them to the boss.
yeah,
And what we're gonna do is everyone should think of a tactic. Maybe don't look at what everyone else is writing, and then we're going to arrange them all. I can create more squares if there aren't enough, but write down 2 or 3, however many you can think of, and then arrange your tactic on the action thermometer. So we want the lowest stakes actions, the easy stuff that you would start to get your coworkers involved at the bottom. And then the low temperature action. I see someone dropping pizza party. Okay. And then the highest stake actions should go at the top. So these are the actions that really turn up the heat against your employer. So anyone having trouble getting into this big jam board?
All right. Who doesn't love buttons? All right. The problem is that unions don't provide enough button makers. Individual workers don't have enough access to button makers. So buttons are cool. Union drip is cool. Any cool labor stuff is cool. Buttons are easy. We need more buttons. Buttons are probably like the easiest thing. I mean, I don't know if people, I'm from a union. So, UFCW 770, 23 years. I don't know what it's like outside of that space, whether, you do get harassed at the workspace for even light forms of like wearing something on your, but buttons. So, that's on the lower scale of escalating action. And then somewhere in the middle, after you've done some stuff, past that, maybe middle to top, that's where I put store delegations to management. So, you've done a bargaining survey, maybe even held like one bargaining session or something like that. Maybe you're lightly sharing to social media or something. And then, in a chain like mine, a smaller chain, like, hey, sometimes it's time to ramp it up and, get workers together and, go on to management, so that's somewhere in the middle top. And then my favorite one is oops, work slowdown. That was mine because I'm pretty sure we can't condone a work slowdown, but if oops, somehow the workers independently of themselves were just happened to be working slower and somehow there was no, way to prove any sort of coordination. But that would be on the really highest side of escalating action. And so as you've been discussing throughout this whole workshop, this is a range here and we start from lower ends of escalating action, like buttons and more buttons. Or I'm sorry, before that, the soda and pizza party. Ugh, but I didn't do that one. That was a good one though. But buttons and more buttons. And then, then you're ramping up and somewhere in the middle and then going to the top. And so, I was happy to add a little piece of all of them. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Anyone else want to share which tactics they put on the thermometer and where and why? Yeah. So I just want to say, some might be a little more obvious than others. Like in most workplaces, a strike is just, it's not easy to pull off. You want to build up to a strike. But yeah, in other workplaces, something that might be easier in one workplace, like wearing a button or sharing a social media post, might be actually a lot more of a riskier action, right? So that's all to say there's not like one strictly right or wrong answer for a lot of this. I think it really depends on your like critical evaluation of your coworkers in your workplace, and what tactics are appropriate. When workers aren't used to seeing any kind of action, you really have to think about how you start small and escalate and get people more and more comfortable. Okay, anyone else want to share what they put down or any reflections they have on these tactics and the action thermometer? Okay. Oh, Emily, go ahead.
Thanks. I as a former teacher, sometimes having a visual like this, like the actual action thermometer, can be enough of a catalyst to get people involved. If you can just ask your coworkers, for example, with us, it's stopping the unwanted transfers. Where do you find your feelings on the thermometer? Where do you see how important an issue is this, or how important of an issue is it? Any issue to get behind? Is it something we should give more import to, less import? I like it as a visual catalyst. I think it's terrific, and I'm gonna turn that into a poster.
Yeah, totally. I will share the slides. You can like copy the image. And by the way, anyone can make one of these big Jamboards too. If you want to do this exercise with your coworkers, if you're planning a campaign, you should be able to like sign up for like a free account and make one of these yourself, or do some other kind of exercise with them. Or better yet, do it in person, right? These trainings are usually done in person. So get a piece of paper or poster board, make a thermometer, get a bunch of sticky notes, and have people assess, in your workplace what the action thermometer looks like. Okay. All right. So in the remaining time for the workshop, we are going to actually do an exercise around planning a campaign. So I love that someone is still working on this. By all means, please continue. Here's another visual. I kind of like to think of this like the action thermometer that's sideways over time. This is Campaign Mountain. We're thinking about arranging the tactics according to increasing intensity over time. So at the beginning of your campaign, you're laying the foundation. You want to do, think about tactics that will just start bringing people in. Then sometimes there's kind of a kickoff action for the campaign. Then you have this escalation period where you're building and building. And then you want to assess the peak of what the peak of your strength is going to be. And in that example we were looking at in the first thermometer I showed you, it was like teachers organizing a walkout of a meeting. So they thought that was the peak of their strength. In other cases, it might actually be a strike or like a slowdown of some kind. And then you'll have the resolution, and that can be, that's also an important period for everyone to come together and just, reflect on how the whole campaign went as well. So we're going to get into breakout groups, which I think Caitlin has been setting up. So what we're going to do, so I'm going to actually drop a Google Doc in the chat. So we're going to be looking at components of the exercise are identifying and organizing issues. So try to pick someone's actual issue. I know you all are in different workplaces for the most part, but pick like an actual issue of someone in your group. What is the widely and deeply felt issue? What is the demand to fix the problem? Who has the power to fix the problem? So I don't think we talked about this earlier, but it's really important to actually have a target in mind. Like, who is the decision maker? Usually it's like the store manager, or maybe it's actually higher up, or maybe it's lower. Maybe it's like your shift supervisor. So who has the power to fix the problem? And then tactics. What do you think will actually move your target? Which tactics are appropriate for this situation? Which tactics do you want to start with? And then which tactics do you want to escalate to? So that's all. I'm going to drop the Google Doc. If I could ask group 1 to just designate a spokesperson, if you could just start us off with what issue you chose and why you chose that issue. Why was it a good organizing issue for you guys?
In our breakout room, we discussed the issue of harassment and bullying in the workplace. better known as workplace psychological abuse, really. And I had just discussed a little bit. I think I actually took up way too much time. I forgot there was a counter. I'm sorry, but a little bit about um, an organization that I helped co-found, Justice for Evan, which I think there's a few people in this room that are aware of the campaign. And long story short, that was born out of the 2021 death by suicide of a 20-year Kroger employee named Evan Seyfried out of Milford, Ohio, who was endured 6 long horrific months of bullying and targeting and by his 2 store managers and various coworkers, and that resulted in his suicide in March of 2021. And 3 months later, his family had filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Kroger and the 2 store managers who are still employed by the company. And the lawsuit is still pending. So we basically just kind of discussed what the ramifications of that were and what the demands would be for a campaign of that nature for anybody that unfortunately has to endure workplace abuse.
I just wanted to, I see in the document you wrote, so, the issue is management, harassment, disrespect of workers. The specific demand it looks like you spoke about is actually having there be consequences for bullying. I see 0 tolerance. If there's harassment, managers should be fired, they should be disciplined, and a public apology is owed to workers. So it's good that you got specific around like a specific demand. So either Erica or someone else. So can you tell us who the target was and why you decided on why that was the appropriate target of the campaign?
I feel like the first step there would probably be keep records for in case of any future lawsuits, and just keep records. Know who's the abusers, and then like in any, not just in labor but in court, you got to keep track of these things. When did the abuse happen? Was it covert? Was it a brazen? They'll be asking you questions like that.
Other things that we talked about in our group was, so identifying the targets, and something that we talked about was that the target can't just be the offending manager that has bullied people, because if our demand is to ask them to be fired, they won't fire themselves. So the target is actually the person directly above them, whether that's HR or the district manager. We talked about trying to first convene or hold a meeting of particularly of the people that were subject to harassment or experienced that harassment and bullying, getting them together in addition with other coworkers that are concerned about this issue or willing to show solidarity with them, to just talk about what's going on and what you want to do about it. We talked a little bit about starting a social media campaign, which is something that the Justice for Evan group has been doing, circulating a petition demanding the 2 managers be fired, organizing letter writing campaigns, talking to the press if the issue persists without resolution, and even organizing a march on like a shareholder meeting or a kind of higher executive meeting.
So I know we're now a little bit over time, so I just want to turn it back over to Eric, just to return to your organizing that you've been doing, starting with the contract survey. Real quick, can you tell us, like, has your group been talking about escalating from there? And I believe the plan is for people to stay on after, right, with Eric and the other essential workers for democracy organizers to just talk further. So just wanted to let you know that that's the plan. But Eric, you want to say a bit more about your campaign?
Yeah, sure. Just to kind of wrap it up with what do we do after this, I guess, is we discussed it as a group, and part of the beginning of all of this was, how do we start thinking about our contract? How do we start thinking about taking back our union? How do we start thinking about even having a decision? And so part of that was deciding as a group through meeting in our Discord how we were going to end the survey. And we made a decision to wrap it up at the end of the year unless something came up that inspired us to do it sooner than that. And we actually just recently got notice of a general membership meeting being held on December 5th in downtown Sacramento. So we pulled together a meeting and we decided that we're going to deliver our current survey results at that time at the general membership meeting and see what happens in terms of it being recognized at least and taken into their possession. And the roadblocks, I think we already discussed that as far as the local leadership getting in the way, and we'll see what happens when we take it up to the next level with whoever's attending this membership meeting, if there's anybody even there. But what we plan to do beyond this is move towards our April contract. We're going to keep talking about it. We're going to keep sharing the results of the group. We're going to build solidarity and knowing that we've got each other's backs and that we've come to a collective idea of what it is we want, and we're going to push for that on our contract. Hopefully we'll get that, and hopefully we don't have to make a decision about whether or not to walk out, but building this team along the way is how we're going to make sure that we can walk out at the end. So it's funny because the destination is the destination, but really it's the friends you make along the way.
And I think that's such a great way of like paraphrasing like what we say about identifying leaders and bringing people to the center of the bullseye. You like, the point is the friends you make along the way and the people you're bringing in. That is such a big part of the organizing. Obviously you also want to win what your campaign is about, but you're not going to do that unless you make a lot of friends, right? You bring a lot of people along. So that wraps up today's training. So big thanks to Eric and everyone else who shared their experience. And I'm going to turn it back over to essential workers and to Eric for the post workshop discussion.
So thank you, Lisa, so much for leading our training. This, I believe, is our second to last of these trainings that we'll be doing on Zoom. So our next one is scheduled for next month. We'll be sharing information on that training via email shortly, so keep an eye out for that.